Members of the January 6th committee say they have not ruled out a subpoena for former Vice President Mike Pence. Mr. Pence spoke about the economy in Chicago today. Last week's January 6th committee hearing focused on former President Trump's push to get him to overturn the 2020 election results. CBS News' Natalie Brand has more from Capitol Hill.
Monday, former Vice President Mike Pence appeared publicly just days after the bombshell House January 6th committee hearing, highlighting the danger he faced last year for refusing to block the certification of the 2020 election.
You know, we've all been through a lot over the last several years. A global pandemic, social unrest, a divisive election, a tragic day in our nation's capital.
Former President Donald Trump attacked his former vice president in rallies over the weekend, and he continued to spread the false election claims at the center of this month's congressional hearings.
We had a rigged and stolen election.
The former president is continuing on his campaign to undercut confidence in the election system.
Committee members have warned of a continued risk of political violence. Congressman Adam Kinzinger, one of two Republicans on the panel, tweeted a picture of a letter sent to his wife containing a threat to execute him and his family.
There is violence in the future, I'm going to tell you. And until we get a grip on telling people the truth, we can't expect any differently.
The Select Committee has scheduled more hearings this week. Tuesdays will focus on the former president's campaign to pressure state election officials. A star witness set to testify, Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, who received this now infamous phone call from Mr. Trump days before January 6th.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
Arizona's Speaker of the State House is expected to testify about efforts to get the Arizona state legislature to override President Biden's win in his state. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
And CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa joins us now. Hey, Bob, good to see you. Thanks for being here. So former Vice President Mike Pence was making what sounded like a campaign speech. He was attacking President Biden on the economy. But I think we were all watching this speech today to see if he had anything publicly to say about what we heard last week in those committee hearings. Did he make any comment about it yet?
Caitlin, good to be with you. Former Vice President Mike Pence spoke this afternoon at the University Club in Chicago. He briefly referred to the Capitol attack. He called January 6, 2021 a tragic day that followed a, quote, divisive election. But beyond those remarks, he did not delve into the testimony last week from some of his closest aides about what happened that day. It's an indication of how Pence, as he eyes a potential 2024 presidential bid, is attempting politically to pivot, to not talk about January 6th, to not get into a long, drawn-out discussion on American democracy, but instead talk about President Biden and the economy, which is more comfortable terrain for a conservative Republican like Pence.
Yeah, interesting to see him making those 2024 moves now and not really waiting for the former president to decide whether he's going to run or not. You know, this relationship between Mike Pence and Donald Trump has just been fascinating to watch how it has frayed. And I know in your book, Peril, you and Bob Woodward have detailed and continue to report about the frayed relations between the two. But what was interesting last week in the hearings, I mean, it really shed light on the way in which the deterioration between the men's staffs occurred. What have we learned about that dynamic?
During his speech this afternoon, the former vice president mentioned his name a couple times, but it was in the context of Trump-Pence and the administration's achievements in his view. He outlined certain policy things that he endorsed and worked on during the course of those 4 years, but he did not go into his relationship with the former president. And let us remember that it was only just a few days ago that former President Trump assailed Pence in remarks in Nashville in front of conservative activists, said Pence didn't have courage on January 6th to do what Trump wanted him to do, which was try to delay or disrupt the certification of Biden's election.
And we know that Pence didn't really talk about the committee, obviously, today, but is there any more discussion of possibly a subpoena for him from the committee?
Congressman Adam Schiff of California, a member of the committee, told CBS News earlier today that the committee is seeking testimony from Pence, but they have not yet formally decided to issue a subpoena, but they would like to hear from Pence. That's according to Schiff. Where this all goes is not really clear at this point. Just like with Ginny Thomas, the spouse of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, the committee is signaling that it wants to gather more information, but how exactly it does that with an invitation to come by versus a formal subpoena is something that's under discussion.
Certainly would be interesting to hear from him. And also, what about tomorrow? What is the focus of tomorrow's committee hearing?
Tuesday's hearing will focus on the pressure campaign led by Trump and his allies like lawyer Rudy Giuliani to entice state officials in Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and elsewhere to block electors from being counted or to send what are called alternate electors to Congress to be considered. It was a scheme that was outlined by John Eastman, the conservative lawyer, Giuliani, and others. And what we're going to hear tomorrow, based on my conversation with committee sources, is the backstory, the behind-the-scenes details of how Giuliani and Trump had calls and meetings and Zoom meetings with all of these state officials trying to get them to push Biden electors out in some way.
All right, it's been really interesting to hear from so many Republicans testifying in front of this committee, including the Secretary of State of Georgia, who, of course, was at the center of all of that. Robert Costa, thank you so much for your reporting. We appreciate it.
Thank you.